Hello, hello, hello. It is currently March 16th, 2017. I am Silverhypnosis, and this is a new State of the Channel video. I actually don't know what number it is. I didn't check before doing it, so I'm assuming we're at like 12 or 13, probably. One of those. Anyway, let's start off by saying that I'm thankful for about hitting 4,400 subscribers. I think in the last one I did like 2 months ago, I said that my goal for 2017 was to hit 10K, so doing alright on that regard. Sorry about not having as much content up as quickly as I did last month. I sort of went in between having a ton of content up and then not having a lot up but trying to get more up. For those of you who pay attention to my Tumblr or my Twitter, you know I've had a lot of issues at home, issues dealing with various things coming up, deaths in the family, deaths of people who are related to my family, surgeries, things like that. So there's been a lot of that. And that's kind of been throwing everything into chaos, essentially. But hopefully that's all done with and gone and in the past now. Hopefully all of that is in the past, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. And I can go back to making more content, and I can go back to making more content more frequently. I should have another video up probably today. That's my goal, at least. Or to have it scripted, so I just have to record it. Speaking of recording and scripting and everything else, I've been getting a lot of requests, I guess, which is good. But I get a lot of requests I've been getting a lot of requests lately, in sort of odd ways, I guess, and for things that don't make a lot of sense. Let me try and explain what I mean. So I have multiple ways to contact me. The best way is either on Twitter or through my email. Honestly, email is the best way to contact me. Send me email if you want to. Give me suggestions or things like that, because I'll know when I get it. The thing is, though, is that I've had a couple people who have sent me so many emails, and I don't mean like, sent me emails like talking to me. I mean sending me emails like they send the same email over and over and over again, within the same day. So much so that it got hit by my spam filter. I think somebody sent me 17 emails in a single day, and my spam filter picked it up because it thought it was spam. And so I only realized that recently. So don't do that. Don't spam my inbox, because it will end up in my spam filter, and then I won't see it. So that's a problem. Also, I get a bunch of requests for things that don't make sense, or things that I'm probably not going to do. Case in point, I got a request for something so specific that there was no way I was going to do it, and it was like for a one-on-one. It was like a file that was based on the idea that it was a one-on-one with a certain character, but it was done in a sexual way, and I'm like, there's no way for me to make a file out of that. Like, that's what I do. Like, I can make files so that the most amount of people can listen to them. And I actually have gotten some good feedback lately, in addition to that. So despite all the weird suggestions, I have gotten some good feedback. And one of the things I was talking to somebody about was specifically both my paid content and my free content. All of my files, with the exception of the hypnotic conditioning files, which are meant to be a series, all of them are with an induction. So all of them contain an induction plus whatever triggers, effects are supposed to be for them. And a couple of people actually have suggested to me, they said, well, why don't you just have one file that has the induction, and then people will then go and listen to the other files, and then they don't have to listen to just the induction. They can just listen to the effects. And the reason I don't do that is because, one, not everybody listens to every one of my files. In fact, pretty early on I realized that the best way to do a channel like this would be to produce lots of different content with the understanding that the people who like one kind of file are not going to listen to the kinds they don't like. It's very much such an eclectic amount of files. The best way for people to listen is for them to, best way to put it would be for them, like, to listen to the ones they want. And the people who just come in and listen to my files, like the people who just like see during a search results or what have you, or shared something from somebody else, they're not going to want to start a video and then have to go find another video to watch the video. You know, you shouldn't be assigning homework before you listen to one of my files, is the way I see it. You should not be having to do preparation work to any real extent before listening to my files. So that's why I don't do that. But the idea would be, okay, well, what about your paid files? Because the questions I was getting were, well, you know, you make a paid file that's 40 minutes long and 20 minutes of it is induction. And I go, yes. And the reason is because if I'm making a paid file, I should not be telling people to go listen to another file before they make a paid file. And because that I sell my files in multiple places, it would be impossible for me to then be like, okay, before you listen to my file here, you need to go to this website and listen to this free file before you listen to this file. And that just doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. At least not to me. Because I feel like that would be too much effort for most people. I feel like most people wouldn't do that. Now, the thing about, another question I get is, so why do you do more, I guess, in-depth things for paid files? Why do you do certain things that you don't do in free files when you do pay? Well, because the answer to that is, aside from the whole morality thing about things like financial domination, things like that, which I would never offer for free, because I feel that's kind of immoral, or the fact that things are more sexual, which is, well, again, why I make them paid, because there are different rules on YouTube depending on whether or not something is paid or free. When you make something that's paid, rather than use YouTube's normal guidelines, it goes under the same guidelines that movies and television shows do. So you can get away with a lot more with a paid file than you can with a free file. And you could say, okay, well, why don't you just mark it as age restricted? Well, the problem with being age restricted on YouTube is, if it's a free file that's age restricted, one, you don't get ad revenue, which I don't really get a whole lot of anyway, because ad revenue on every platform sucks, to say the least. But the other reason is that it doesn't show up in search results. So the chances of people even finding it are not very good. But back to the original idea of why I make paid content more in depth is because, by and large, the people who I feel are buying content, or buying my content, who are buying hypnosis files, are people who know what hypnosis is, they know how it works, and they know if it works on them. Because I don't think people are throwing down money to buy files that they don't know that are going to work for them. So the market for the paid files are people who are already familiar with hypnosis, people who are familiar with being hypnotized, people who are familiar with the kinds of things that they're experiencing. Whereas the free files are basically for anyone who's curious. And the way I see it is, if you're struggling with free files, you're not going to then spend money on paid files. That's kind of how I see it. The way I see it is, people who find a great deal of success with the free files are then going to be like, wow, okay, maybe I'll pay for files, because I don't feel like because I make the paid files, or I try to make them more complex, more in depth. I feel like that will work a lot better for the people who are listening to them, as opposed to working with the kind of more general stuff that I try and do with my free files. Um, what else? Okay, so the other thing I've been sort of looking into lately, um, people have asked me a number of other questions. They've asked me things like, "Do you do Skype?" And I don't. I don't like Skype. I've never liked Skype. Um, I find Skype to be kind of a unpleasant thing for me. I don't particularly like it. I'm very much a private person, so I don't really like to do one-on-ones with people. It's not really how I am. I don't have Snapchat either. People keep asking me, "Do you have Snapchat? Do you have Snapchat?" Snapchat, and I go, "Why?" Now, to be fair, I did have a Snapchat like a year and a half ago. I deleted it. And the reason is because A, I found it to be not very useful. I sort of found it to be difficult. I sort of found it to be a platform that I wasn't interested in. And the other thing is I get enough dick pics from guys in my email. I don't need more of them on Snapchat, to say the least. I found Snapchat to be a platform that wasn't useful to me. Now, on one hand, I could have used it to verify people's identities because taking pictures and I can see it. On the other hand, again, I don't really need more dick pics. I don't understand why people send dick pics, but I get tons of them in my email. Like, people, like, I don't understand the concept of sending those. I just don't get it. Especially in email, I don't get that. I just don't understand it. I've never asked for them. I don't want them. I don't know why I get them. But speaking of email and things people are doing, people apparently have decided it's a great idea to try to sign up for things with my email. Okay? People apparently have decided it was a great idea to use my email address that I provide for this and use it to sign up for websites. Now, I've had this happen before, but this is the first time somebody used it to sign up for a gambling website, like a real money gambling website that's not legal in the United States. It was like some website on like the Isle of Man, and I had to email them out because they kept sending me emails like, "Oh, you signed up for this," and I emailed them like, "Yeah, listen, if you don't shut down the account and ban my email address from being used, I'm gonna have to like sue you because A, it's not legal in the United States, and B, you're using this without, my permission. So you should probably ban this, and I don't really want to like call a lawyer and be like, hey, I don't really want to, send an international injunction to, do this. It seems like a bad idea." And they were really quick. Like within like 20 minutes, they were like, "Oh, sorry," and just shut the account down. So that's good. What else? Oh, it's almost tax season. That's fun. I am an LLC now. I finally got all of the paperwork and all of the licenses that you need to be an LLC in my state. Licensing includes I needed. Let's see. I needed 1 for the federal government. I needed 2 for the state government. I needed 6 for the county government, and I needed 2 more for the city government that I'm in. And that's just to register yourself as a limited liability corporation. Although the funny thing is that you're considered because you're a single person LLC and not a corporation, because then I'd have to pay corporate tax. I'm basically, how do I put it? It's a what did they put it? What did they write it down as? It was like a non-disclosed entity or something like that, where you're basically filing for yourself, but you're still a limited liability corporation. And taxes suck. I mean, I know taxes suck. Taxes always suck. It's just, for example, I pay on my business income, I pay 25%, roughly, at the tax bracket I'm at. So I basically, as a business, pay 1/4 of everything I make in taxes. And that doesn't include personal tax. That's just business tax. Then I have to pay myself I have to pay myself, I guess, a wage, you would say, even though I'm paying myself everything. But then I get taxed on that. So after taxes, I pay things. So I basically pay double tax rate for doing this way. But that's because if you don't do it this way, you pretty much are seen as being tax evasive, and that's not good. So it's a little weird. And the other thing is I'm also considered a contractor with Google. So, for example, like normally when you work for a company, you file a W-2. Okay, so normally when you go to a company, you file as an employee, and so you don't pay business tax. You pay income tax because you've already had taxes taken out of your paycheck. That's why when at the end of the year, if you haven't made enough money, you get a tax return, because the return is you accidentally paid more in taxes than you needed to. So the federal government pays you again to get rid of all that money that you paid to them that you didn't need to, essentially. But when you're a contractor, you don't do that. You do a W-6. Or no, not W-6, W-4. You do a W-4 tax, and what that is it means you're an independent contractor who is paid by another company, but you are not an employee of that company. You're an outside business, which means you pay business tax on top of personal tax. So there's that. Now, luckily, I haven't made too much, so I don't have to worry about paying too much in taxes. In fact, if I estimate everything I need to pay in taxes this year out, I actually paid more to be an LLC than I'll pay in taxes probably, because it was not cheap to incorporate. It was not cheap to become a limited liability corporation, but it's probably a good idea. And what's funny about that is after I became a limited liability corporation, I had all these people on YouTube try to send me things, like people who are like, "Oh, we'll be your legal defense. You just have to sign up with our." Like collection group. We're in our what do you call it? Like they're basically like these organizations which do nothing except put YouTubers into contracts with the idea that they will promote and protect you legally, but they essentially own everything you do. So basically you become a serf to these people, and they're almost criminal in a lot of ways, because these organizations that exist are essentially like content protectors. They exist to essentially represent you legally. They exist, like, that's the idea, is that they represent themselves as, hey, we want to talk to you and convince you that you need our legal protection, and while we also promote your channel to help you grow. And they're like, what they really want is, hey, we take a cut of everything you make, and we own all your content because you did it under us. Is essentially what they do. And if that sounds shady as fuck, it is shady. It's really shady, and it's also something I don't need. But it's interesting that I get a lot of requests from these people, from these organizations that are like, oh yeah, totally. See, but here's the thing, like, that makes sense if you're like a Let's Player, or if you're doing movie reviews, or if you're doing, something like that. Because at any moment, the people who own the original content, which you're using under fair use, can sue you. So, for example, to be more specific, a good example is Nintendo. So if you sit down and you will play a Nintendo game on YouTube, Nintendo of America can claim your content essentially as stolen from them, even though you're using it to create something new, which is the whole purpose behind fair use. Is they can just claim it as stolen and shut you down, or at best at worst they shut you down, but at best they like steal your income or force you to play ads that they then make money off of. So you actually don't make anything if they do that. But the idea is that these groups, these organizations, then represent you legally speaking. But I don't need that because all of the content I produce is my own content. Like all my content is my voice, my scripts. All the audio is mine. I'm not doing it. I'm not using anyone else's intellectual property. I suppose you could argue that the spiral that I use is not mine, in that I use one with a open commons, which basically means it's public domain. I just use a public domain spiral, so I'm legally allowed to do that. Not to mention, now that's not to say I wouldn't like to create my own spiral to get out of that, but I don't have a graphic designer, and I'm not a graphic designer, and I don't know anything about animation, so yeah. So again, I don't really need these companies, but it's just kind of interesting that all of these scam companies sort of exist and have been sending me things, lots and lots of things. And on top of that, I've gotten a lot of requests from people where they're like, oh man, how do I do this? How do you become a YouTuber? How do you, one of the phrases that comes out a lot is, what is, your YouTube journey? And I'm like, that is the worst. Don't call it that. I hate that. It sounds so pretentious. It sounds so pretentious and it sounds wrong because it's not a journey. It's not a journey. That sort of mischaracterizes what someone like me does, because a journey implies that you're doing this to go somewhere else. You don't. The journey to the grocery store is not a journey in the sense of there's nothing wondrous about it. You're just going to the store. It's a new location that you're now going to do something at. So the idea that you would call YouTube, doing things on YouTube, a YouTube journey would imply that being on YouTube is not the end goal. The goal would then be something else. And I think I've made it pretty clear, from everything that I've done, that, making audio files is what I want to do. It's not that I wouldn't like to do other things. It's just that making audio files is what I would like to do now, and if I had the option to do other things, I certainly would add them on top of this. But it's sort of interesting where people are like, man, talk about your journey. I'm like, it's not really a journey. It's not so wondrous. When people say it's a journey, they're talking about, it almost adds a sort of what do you call, motivational speaker-esque thing into it? People start going, it's your journey towards, when people say, it's a weight loss journey, it's my journey to self-love, or something to that extent. It's this idea that you are going somewhere. It's not what I do. This is a job. To say what I do is, to say what I do on here is a journey would be kind of like saying if you worked at Home Depot, it would be my Home Depot journey. It doesn't seem applicable. It doesn't seem accurate to use that, because it just isn't the case, if that makes sense. And I don't know if this is a thing that other YouTubers get, but I get a whole lot of people who've asked me to do other things. They come onto my channel and they ask me, man, are you ever going to do X, Y, Z? And I'm like, but that has nothing to do with hypnosis. Why are you coming to my hypnosis channel to ask me about this kind of thing? It's it reminds me of when I worked retail and people would walk in and ask us, I worked at not a pharmacy, but basically a Rite Aid, CVS, Walgreens sort of store, something like that, where we had a pharmacy, but we also were a corner store kind of thing. And people would walk in and ask for things like lawnmowers. We had people walk into what was essentially almost a gas station store, and people go, do you sell lawnmowers? And we'd be like, no, we don't sell lawnmowers. And I'd be like, why on earth are people walking in to what is ostensibly a quickie mart and asking about hardcore lawn equipment? Why are people doing this? things like that. Like that's how I feel when people come up to me, like send me messages on my channel and say things like, are you ever gonna do the X challenge? Or are you ever going to do the talk about your journey? Are you gonna do this new trend thing that all YouTubers are doing? And I'm like, no, because that's not what this channel is. It's not. Asking me that kind of thing is sort of like going to a Home Depot and asking for a haircut. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, yeah, you probably could do it there, but you shouldn't. You really shouldn't. It's sort of odd that way. Like that's how I feel sometimes when I get some questions. I also find it a little interesting when people, like the first thing people comment on some of my files is, does this work? And that sort of confuses me. Because I understand when people listen to my files, and if they have trouble with it, which, that's perfectly normal, and there's nothing wrong with, struggling, because hypnosis is a skill. It's a skill which some people start off better or worse, depending on, how good they are at certain things. But you can always get better at it. So I understand when people, try one of my files, especially ones with visualization, and if they struggle with it, and then they're like, okay, it doesn't work. I get that. It doesn't work for certain people because of certain problems. I understand this. What I don't understand is people who go onto a file and say, does this work? Because I'm like, why not just listen to it, and then if you listen to it, you will know if it works or not for you. That would make sense to me. That makes sense to me, but it's just sort of one of those things that I get questions about that doesn't make any sense. At least not to me. At least not to me. Let's see. Any other thing? Because I've been talking for almost 30 minutes. Because I haven't done one of these in a while. And I sort of felt like covering a giant range of topics that have come up that I've been sort of storing in a notepad document of all this stuff I should probably talk about to get it over with. Sort of give people an idea of what I'm up to and what I'm doing and things like that. I am sort of still looking for people to collaborate with, like other people who make content. I looked into ASMR channels a bit because people said, "Oh, you should look into these," and they're interesting. But I don't think most of the people who do those are at all interested in me. Oh, one second. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. My throat's already giving out because I've been talking for 30 minutes. So it's sort of my hey, stop talking. That's sort of the, hey, stop talking. You've been talking for 30 minutes without a break. You should probably stop doing that. But yeah, I've been looking for people to collaborate with. I would like, ASMR channels make the most sense, but I don't think the people who own those channels are all that interested in me. From feeling out there and seeing what people are interested in. There's also the problem of the somewhat toxic YouTube hypnosis community, and I don't mean that as a how do I put this? Basically, when people do or collaborate with hypnotists, generally it's only good to do it on their channel, which is not something I want to do on this channel. But if they do it on their own channels, basically they end up getting harassed by perverts and rather immoral people who do things that are less than moral. They also have individuals who do things like accuse other people of being pedophiles and things like that, despite the fact that there's no evidence or even logic behind that. I had this one guy who eventually had to block on this thing because he kept ranting and raving. His name was Mystic True or something like that, and essentially he's this German guy who basically goes around and accuses everybody of being pedophiles and rapists, and essentially just goes out of his he sounds like he's crazy. He sounds like he's gone off the deep end. And he does this to everybody on YouTube, for example. But he also goes to like demands like religious conversion and things like that, and demands that like people turn to Jesus and things. It's really awkward, but it's really weird. But my point is that like when people put YouTube or hypnosis content on YouTube, people like that and people who are less than moral end up harassing these people, which then scares them off, which then makes them not want to do it anymore because the people who are in the community are toxic and terrible. Okay? The people who are abusive and, and basically scum, and they are scum, make no mistake. The people who take advantage of other people and try to, like, trigger people without their consent are scum, and they are terrible people, and that's a crime. The fact of the matter is that those kind of people, because they end up harassing all the people who are even, like somewhat interested in this kind of thing, you end up A, giving everything a bad name, and B, you end up scaring all the people away so that no one wants to actually do it, and that's a bad thing. You're essentially making what you want, in theory, scarce. If that makes sense. Like, it's sort of like, if you see something you like, you're supposed to encourage it, not attempt to hijack it, and then ruin it for everybody. If that makes sense. Because, it can be fun, it can be, rewarding, you can do good things with it, but the problem is that it seems like, this has always been the case. This has always been the case, even going back years. Like, even going back, 4 years ago, when I started I started actually, looking into this kind of thing on YouTube itself. This was a problem. This was a big problem. And hasn't gone away. And it's really not good, because, it just hurts everybody in the community. It hurts the people who are trying really hard to do things well. I know that people like Hypnosis Please, Felix, has had his own problems with that, and I know that Ultra Hypnosis has had his problems with that. In fact, I think Ultra Hypnosis now, if anyone, he finds anybody who's listening to his content, he just automatically DMCA takedowns them to protect them, because he doesn't want his content associated with people who are taking advantage of other people. And I understand that. So far, I've been rather lucky that I don't have to worry about people re-uploading my content either, which is kind of nice. I think I've only had one person who ever did that, and I had to DMCA them, because I really don't like it when people take my content and then try to use it to trick people. That seems really wrong. But yeah, it's sort of the community on a whole is it's a bit toxic, and it's sort of a bad thing. It sort of depresses me in some levels that I know for example, I have a very, very strict word filter on my comment section. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because, I go out of my way to try to create a community that is safe and that is encouraging to people who enjoy this kind of thing. I try to go out of my way to create a community where people can comment without having to worry about crazy people trying to trigger them or trying to harass them or things like that. I try and create a community where, how do I put this? I try and create a community where where people don't have to worry, basically. I do a lot of different things on my channel. I do a lot of eclectic things, which I started talking about 30 minutes ago, but anyway, I do a lot of eclectic things, and I do that because I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy the challenge of getting requests that no one else really does and making them work. I enjoy the process, the experimentation of it. I enjoy the science of it in a lot of ways. I enjoy seeing and hearing about people's results. I enjoy getting feedback. But to do this well, I have to sort of make it so that people don't have to worry, or do my best to ensure that people don't have to worry about people going out of their way to cause problems, I guess is the way to put it. Like, I sort of have to pay attention more to ensure that you don't have people who are, harassing people or stalking people or things like that, because that's wrong. And, though I can't stop it outside of my channel, I can certainly stop it on my channel, as best I can. Now, whether or not you think I should or what have you is another argument entirely, but the fact is that's what I do. And hopefully going forward, you'll see more, I guess, hypnotists and their communities sort of, I guess, not police themselves, but sort of create a larger, like, more unified community. Like, I would love, like, I know that, like, the people who listen to me probably also listen to Felix, and that's fine. That's actually encouraged. In fact, I'm just going to do this now. If you don't know who Hypnosis Please is, he's a really nice guy, and he does some really interesting content, and he's done a lot of interesting things over the years. So go check him out if you haven't yet. Ultra Hypnosis 2 is probably the oldest hypnosis channel on YouTube, probably the biggest. But again, like, I know there's overlap between these communities, and I don't see why there shouldn't be. Like, I would encourage overlap, because people who enjoy hypnosis shouldn't have to feel like they need to be ostracized from other people. Like, we all sort of share ideas, we all sort of share techniques, because all of our techniques come from the same place. That would be Milton Erickson. In fact, I find it kind of funny when I've had people accuse me of, I've had people accuse me, like, man, you steal you steal his wording. And I'm like, no, you don't steal it. It's written by the father of hypnosis, Milton Erickson. It's a tried and true technique that everyone uses. Guys on YouTube do not own this technique. It was written about in the 60s, It was written by the father of hypnosis himself. So it's kind of funny when that happens. But again, I think people, I suppose my hope is that in the future, like, the community as a whole will be more moral, more welcoming, more open, and not as dominated by the people who take it way too far, would be the way to put it. Because I understand that people have a hypnosis fetish. I get that. In fact, my content probably in many ways caters to a lot of those people. Like, I get that. But you also have to remember that the people who are, like, if you enjoy watching people be hypnotized, you have to remember that those are people. Like, those are real people with feelings and needs and, lives. They don't just exist to be, they're not objects. They don't exist to be fetish fuel for you forever, And maybe that's just because when, in my experience, it's always best to work with people as people. I mean, that's just kind of how I see it. But yeah, I would sort of hope that you could sort of, like, keep people from taking it way too far. That would be my hope. And that would go a long way towards, inspiring more people to create, inspiring more people to be interested, removing a lot of the fears that people have. Because people are actually, like, the most common thing that I hear when I talk to people about hypnosis is that they're afraid. That they're, like, afraid that someone's going to do something to them. And, we shouldn't, that shouldn't be a worry. Like, the people who do this kind of thing, people like me, people like Felix, we have to spend a lot of time, creating a sense of trust between us and the people who listen to us. And there should never be a feeling of, I don't know if I can trust what's going to happen kind of thing. That's not really a good thing. That's a bad thing. And it just sort of goes to like, the community as a whole sort of, these, I want to say these extreme elements, who harass people, who stalk people, who attempt to trigger people against their will kind of thing. Those people do not help matters. In fact, they actively contribute to the sense that, this is something you have to be worried about, which is not the case, which people should not be worried about. it's sort of the people. You can't treat people like objects. You can't, you shouldn't really, if you like, even if your only reason for being on YouTube, like, let's just use the most extreme example. If you were on YouTube and the only reason you were there was to convince people to listen to hypnosis files on camera, which you shouldn't do, by the way. Don't do that. That's bad. If that was your only reason for being on YouTube, which it shouldn't be, but for the sake of example, that was your only reason, it stands to logic, it stands to reason that you would want to cultivate a sense that you would want to cultivate like trust and cultivate comfort in people. You would want to cultivate cultivate the idea that this is the kind of, like, this is not only like normal, but this is fun. Like, you would want to cultivate something where it was like normalcy. You would want to make it almost so that, like, there was nothing wrong and that there was no pressure or oddness about doing it. Because then more people would see it and go, "Oh, I want to do that too." And then you'd have more content. Like, that's like, if that was your only reason for being on YouTube, you think the logical thing would be to try to engender a sort of normalcy about it. If that makes sense. You would sort of want to engender a sense of, I guess, like, you would want to, like, create a sense of, like, you want to create a sense of, like, other people see this and go, "Oh, I want to do that too." You would not want to scare all these people away. You would not want to create a sense that this is weird, that there are weirdos on the internet who are doing this just so they can, like, harass you and stalk you. You would not want that. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what you wouldn't want to do. But that seems to almost be what they do, which doesn't make any sense to me. But again, like, that's the kind of thing I try to, like, fight against, and I sort of like, A, it's uncomfortable for everybody, and obviously me talking like this is not going to convince anybody. It's not going to convince anybody. Like, no one's going to listen to what I'm saying and going, "Oh, wow, I can't believe I was doing that. I was wrong." No, that's just not how it is. Like, it's not how it works. But it just sort of, like, I kind of wish that, like if I had anything, like, if you could say, if you could change the community at all, like, how would you do it? I'd be like, well, I'd like to make it, like, way more open, way more, like, way more welcoming. I would like, people in my community who listen to my files to feel safe and secure enough to talk to each other without having to worry about these people who essentially go out there and harass and stalk people, because that's not cool and not all right. But anyway, I've been talking almost for 45 minutes, so I'm going to cut it here, and hopefully I won't wait another 2 months before doing another one. Thanks again for almost 4,500 subscribers, and I'll see you all later.